So today's Rambam, Wednesday Beis Ear, Tiferet Shebitferes, Hilchos Shchenim, Perek Shvi, Shmini, and Shi. So the truth is that the subject that we're going to talk about today spans not just these three prakim, but a lot of the issues that have been raised and will be raised in Hilchos Shchenim, which is very relevant in today's contemporary society as well, as we will see. A lot of the Rambams and a lot of the explanations on the Rambams are reliant on the Rambams that we've learned already and Rambams that we will learn. So it's difficult to pin down exactly a specific Rambam in today's shir. However, let's start with one Rambam so we have a base. So the Rambam in Perek Shvi of Hilchos Shchenim Halacha Vav, the general Perek Shvi, the seventh Perek of Hilchos Shchenim, talks about one of the aspects of a relationship between neighbors and the intrusion of one neighbor into another neighbor, what he's allowed to do, what he's not allowed to do. I don't want to say that it's simply about hezekriya, which refers to the damages done by looking into another person. However, it is an aspect of intrusion of his privacy and hezekriya, but there's different aspects of it and different types of hezekriya. So in Perek Shvi, for example, it talks about windows. A window into somebody else's property from the home. The Gemara talks about whether it's directly from the bayis or the chutzner, etc. So let's start with one Rambam and we'll go from there and explain at least the rudimentary concepts that I want to explain. The Rambam in Perek Shvi Halacha Vav says as follows: if somebody opens up a window to his neighbor's courtyard, and the neighbor, the courtyard, the owner of the courtyard, allows it. If he forgives him, he agrees to it. So there's a general Rambam that the Rambam's shita, and this is clearly in Perek Halacha Ches and in other places, that by nizakin, by certain damages, especially in these type of neighborly damages, there is no need for either a chazaka of shalosh shanim. In other words, the person who is intruding on his other friend and the neighbor agrees to it, doesn't need to have it for 3 years, and he doesn't even have to have a time. That's the Rambam shita. So this is clear. This is explained and clarified in this halacha. If somebody opens up a window to his friend's chutzner, and the neighbor, the friend, agrees to it, and he's obviously good with it. He even expresses himself that, yes, you're allowed to. I have no problem with you opening up a window. How does he gila daite? How does he express himself? He helps him make the window. He knows about this potential damage that could be by looking into his friend's courtyard, and he doesn't argue. So the former person, he has a chazaka, he has the allowance of having a window, and the neighbor can come and say, listen, I'm sorry, I changed my mind. I'd like you to cover your window. I'd like you to board up your window. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Maybe later we'll come to a different, more Rambams, but that's the general premise. So, okay, so the Gemara, the very famous pasuk, we say it every day in davening. Maybe tomorrow morning when you daven, you'll remember the shir. We start off our davening by saying Matayvu Ayalecha Yaakov Mishkan Esecha Yisrael. So Rashi says over there on the Parshas Balak in Bamidbar, Matayvu Ayalecha. Why was Bilam so impressed? Al Shiro Pischayim She'einan Mechuvanim Zemulzeh. He saw the structure of the Jewish camp, that the tents were not in front of each other, the windows, and nobody was able to look into the other person's tent. So the Mishnah in Bava Basra, it's a very the mission of Abasra tells us, Daf Samach, he says, person should leyiftach adam lechatzer ashutfim, Pesach keneged chalein, Pesach keneged Pesach, chalein neged chalein, etc. A person shouldn't open. This is something that you're not allowed to do. The Rambam is talking about if he did it with the agreement, but in general, this is something that you're not allowed to do. So there's a very interesting question brought out by a contemporary Paisik in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, these laws are very applicable because virtually 100% of the time, the laws of Shchenim are not between a Jew and a non-Jew, but they're between two Jews, and usually many times between two Jews that are Shomer Torah and mitzvahs. So the question was posed to the Rabbanim, the Bezdin. A contractor bought a empty field in a place where they're in a residential area, and he's planning to build 10 units, 10 apartments, 10 condos, and the neighbors that are living next to the empty lot, they want to stop the building. And what's their complaint? Their complaint is, by this 10-unit building, maybe it was higher, maybe it was the structure, the way the contractor wants to build the building, there will be windows opposite windows, and the people living, the current people living in the building next door to this empty lot, they will not be able to continue using their property or their residences or their courtyards or their backyards or their porches the way they've been doing it till now. So they want to stop the building. The contractor says, I'm sorry, there's no such thing anymore as hezekriya. I mean, people living on top of each other in cities, in Bnei Brak, and etc. There's no such thing as hezekriya. Everybody, you go on your porch, you can see everything what's going on. And the minhag hamedina is that you build buildings very close to each other, and there's no such thing as that you can stop because of hezekriya. So the question is, who's correct? They're coming to a din Torah. So interestingly enough, this is the crux of the shir, the point of the shir, whether this question of Pesach mul Pesach that the Gemara talks about and that the Shulchan Aruch talks about, the Rambam talks about, this window opposite a window, a door opposite a door, is this a question of Isser v'Heter? Is it something of Isser, of a halacha aspect, meaning a ruchni's aspect, so to speak? We'll see in a second what that means. Or is this a money aspect question? It's a question of money, that by a person has a right, certain money right to his residence, to his field, to his courtyard, and another person cannot destroy it. So the truth is, there's a big machlekes harishonim. On the one hand, the Rameh and the Rashba both learn that this is a Isser dike concept. In other words, the Rameh and Bava Basra over there, one of the famous Rishonim, one of the primary Rishonim on Bava Basra, he learns that the Isser over here is, why can't you open up a window to somebody else's courtyard? Because of the modesty issues. And even though he says he goes even further, and therefore there's no chazaka, there's no, even if there was a chazaka to have such a window, the neighbor can claim that it be boarded up. So the Rameh explains, going back to the Rashi that we began at the beginning of our shir, if you say that this is only a momentous issue, this is only something, a monetary issue that two neighbors have the right to dispute, why would this cause the Shechina to dwell on the Jewish people? If it's merely a money issue, they came to a money conclusion, etc., etc. Why would this involve the Shechina? It must be that the taina of Pesach, Neged Pesach, is not only a din issue, meaning a momentous issue. This is also a Isser issue, and therefore there's no chazaka, and we'll see in a minute, another nafkimina. The Rashba also agrees that the Rashba in a tshuva, Chelik Beis, he he explains the Mishnah Makom Shenagu Livnes Gevil Hakel K'Minigam Medina. So he says even though Hakel Lasui Hutze V'Dafna, the type of material that's used in the walls, nevertheless, when it comes to the essence of looking into somebody else's property, even though there's a minig, even though there's such a custom in that place, it's a minig betos, because there's no such thing by the only way that you have mechila is by mumminess, is by money issues. But in tznius, there's no such thing as mechila, or there's no such thing as allowing it and bending the rules. And he brings down the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan, Damar Krav, Ayisa Bilu Vesena, Vayaris Yisrael, Shechin Nishvatam, Ma'ara, Rosh, Ein Pischei Mechubanim Zelazeh, etc., Nishkena. Okay, so in general, the Paiskim talk about, and there's no question that it's usher to look into somebody's property. I mean, you're not allowed to look into somebody's property and see what they're doing. That's not really the Nekuda here. The Ramah writes clearly that whether there is Hezekriya or not Hezekriya, that has, the question is whether the building will cause this person a damage that he won't be able to utilize it. But it's not the pshat that a person is allowed to look into somebody else's property. I just want to make that clear. So if that's the case, so the Paiskim writes, so what's the pshat of Matayvu Alecha Yaakov? What was the greatness that Bilam saw? It would seem that what Bilam saw was that the Jewish people in that generation or in that camp weren't looking. In other words, the godless and the holiness of the Jewish people was that even though they may have been able to look, they didn't look. But it has nothing to do with whether you can open up a window or a doorway to another person's backyard or another person's home. Okay, so also, I just want to mention there's a very famous Mefarish, the Evan Azor, this is Alman Meltzer, that's brought down in the Paiskim. He says that the problem with Hezekriya is not so much the fact whether he will or won't look. He says the tendency or the taiva to look in somebody else's property, if you're able to, is so great that the Chachamim were magdir that you shouldn't even be able to bring it, because they felt that if there would be an opportunity, he would look. Okay, so therefore, so what's the nafkamina if the general Hezekriya that we're discussing, the looking into somebody else's property or looking into somebody else's courtyard, or the ability to look into somebody else's courtyard, what is the nafkamina? The nafkamina would be if it's mammon or isser, if it's mammon, if it's a money issue, so mechila would help. You would be able to meichel. The neighbor would be able to meichel. If it's iser, mechila doesn't help. The same thing whether a chazaka. If it's a question of mammon, there would be there would be a chazaka, or there wouldn't even need there wouldn't even need to be a chazaka, meaning the mere fact that it exists with the permission, like we'll see in a second, that's enough. However, if it's iser, a chazaka, doesn't, wouldn't apply. And that's actually the shita of the Ramban. The Ramban learns that Hezekriya doesn't help chazaka. He argues on the Rambam that we learned at the beginning of our shir. So the Rambam actually, in our Rambam that we began with this year, the Rambam states clearly that if you open up a chalein lechatzar chaverei, harei ze hachzik b'chalein. So the Rambam says clearly that chazaka does help by a chalein. There's also another Rambam, I believe it's in tomorrow's shir, Perik Yud Aleph Halacha Dalid, Perik Yud Aleph Halacha Dalid, that he says it even clearer. Excuse me. Perik Yud Aleph Halacha Dalid says the Rambam. Says the Rambam. it's a long halacha, so I'm not going to read the whole halacha. He begins by saying, all the distances that we are required that have been discussed in today's shir, in the 9th parak and also the 10th parak. So he ends up by saying, and why are these damages different? If person doesn't tolerate such a nezek, but the assumption is that he's not meichel, because it's a constant damage. Says the Rambam clearly in Perek Yud Aleph halacha dalid that chazaka does help and mechila does help. So it would seem to say that the Rambam learns that this is a din in Mamonis, and mechila and chazaka helps, and actually that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Siman Kuf Mem Beis. The Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat Siman Kuf Mem Beis paskins like the Rambam, and in other places Siman Kuf Mem Daled and the Rama that mechila does help. So according to this, it would seem that it's a din in Mamonis, and therefore since it's a din in Mamonis, mechila would help. Now there is, however, another Rambam that says that Hezekriya doesn't help chazaka. That's in okay. But in other words, if it's real Hezekriya, again, I want to try to differentiate between the fact that a person actually looks and the fact that it's a potential. But so the Rambam would write. The Rambam indicates that in the case of a suffix. So there's another machlekes in the case of a suffix of a doubtful hezekriya. So the Rambam would indicate it's interesting that that there's a machlekes between the Rambam and the Rosh about suffix hezekriya, and it seems that there's a shtickle problem because the Rambam learns that a suffix hezekriya you're machmer, and the Rosh learns that a suffix hezekriya you're makel. So that would indicate that in pure hezekriya, not in the chalain and not in other types of instances, but in a pure hezekriya where a person actually has the ability to really more than a chalain. Again, that's in tomorrow's shir. They differentiate between the types of hezekriya. I know I'm being a little bit vague and a little bit superficial, but there are differences in the extent of hezekriya. So a pure hezekriya, the Rambam would indicate that if it's a suffix, you have to be machmer, and the Rosh says it's mekel. So the poskim say it's because in that case the Rambam holds it is isur, that hezekriya is isur. So the Rivash tries to accommodate this contradiction. On the one hand, we see that the Rambam, when it comes to a window, he seems to indicate that you could open up a window and a chazaka does help. However, when it comes to pure hezekriya in Perek Yud Aleph, he seems to indicate that you have to be machmer. Says the Rivash that the Rambam learns that if that it's a ksas iser, and if it's a ksas iser by hezekriya, you can force the person to not do it. However, a chalain doesn't have a ksas iser. That's how he's trying to differentiate. Let's just go to the maskana. The maskana is that when it comes to these things, the Rama and Choshen Mishpat learns that you follow dina de malchus dina, and that would indicate again that this is a mamonis issue, because we know that if it would be iser, we wouldn't be able to go on dina de malchus dina. And the Shach argues, and the Shach says that no, we have to go more stringent, and he would indicate that the Shach learns that it's an Isser Dikka din. However, the bottom line as it relates to Payil, the law seems to indicate that you could open up a window to another thing, because that seems to be the minig hamedina, and there are general ways people build buildings in a way that they can mitigate the fact that other people look into it, and just because that person didn't build his building in a way that to mitigate it doesn't mean that I have to suffer and not build my building. So again, we just gave an overview of the various shittas, whether Hezekiah and Chalain and other instances talked about in today's shir is a din and Isser, a din and Baminis, and we went through the Lamaisa Dekadin, how it's Machlekes Rama and Shach, whether it also transfers down to the Baminis and Isser issues. Fabulous.